Again, welcome everyone, and I'd like to specifically thank Katherine Campbell, Amanda MacArthur, Stephanie Hong for joining us today. We really appreciate them taking time out of their busy schedule to share their expertise with us. I would like to introduce Stephanie Hong. She is the engagement manager at Volunteer Match. Her expertise is in social media, paid advertising, search engine marketing, and community engagement. She loves spreading the message of volunteerism and is proud of Volunteer Match's mission of bringing good people and good causes together. And she will be moderating today's session. And with that, I will turn it over to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Volunteer Match's bi-monthly webcast series called Best Practice Network. We are very happy to be joining ACCP members and having ACCP host us this month, so thank you so much, Melinda. Today's topic is professional development, using skills to get ahead and help others. And as Melinda just mentioned, attendees are on mute, but that does not mean we don't want to hear from you. So definitely please type in any questions you have during the webcast, and also we will be monitoring on Twitter. So if you want to ask your questions on Twitter, please do so using hashtag VMBPN. And we'll be answering all questions at the end of the presentation. So another reason to get on Twitter today is you have a chance to win our new book, which is called Volunteer Engagement 2.0. Our speakers today are 2 out of 35 experts in the volunteer field sharing what's next in volunteerism. So it's very exciting. Definitely tweet for your chance to win. We've sold over 2,000 copies and counting, so today's a great chance for you to get a copy in your hands. Okay, so enough housekeeping. I am thrilled to announce today's speakers. First up is Katherine Campbell. She is Executive Director of the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration. Katie has worked in nonprofit and volunteer management for over 30 years as practitioner, trainer, and leader. Welcome, Katie. And also joining us is Amanda MacArthur, Vice President of Global Pro Bono and Engagement for PYXERA Global. Amanda designs and implements corporate social responsibility programs for the public and private sector focused on skills-based volunteerism in emerging markets, leadership development, and sustainable economic impact. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Katie so she can talk about her chapter on professional development.
Okay, thanks so much, Stephanie, and thank you, ACCP, for the opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to kick things off by talking a little bit about professional development from my perspective, and which has been primarily in the nonprofit world, but I am going to try to make it as relevant, hopefully, as possible to you ACCP members out there. So the fact that you're here today listening to this webinar certainly demonstrates that professional development is at least somewhat of a priority for you. So that's wonderful. However, I think the reality is that for many of us as busy professionals, it can get pushed to the back burner and not given as much attention as we know in our hearts it should get. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, as the roles that we're in that involve community engagement, volunteer involvement, corporate philanthropy, those roles really are often, we feel that it's all about everyone else. Our work is focused on the employees who are volunteering out there. It's focused on the nonprofit organizations that you're partnering with. It's all about everybody else. It's not about me. And that's kind of those of us who are drawn to this work tend to have that as our worldview, that our work is all about enabling and supporting other people. So it stands to reason that we don't necessarily give as much attention to our own needs as we might, or as perhaps we should. Hopefully most of you who are on the line today are fortunate enough to have a supervisor who really does understand the depth and complexity of your role. But this is still a rarity in many organizations, and so if it stands to reason that if your role is not well understood by your supervisor, then the chances are less that you will be offered appropriate professional development opportunities. Another common, I think, excuse or reason why we don't make this a priority is that our employers don't pay for it. We say, oh, there's no money in our budget. The money for professional development was the first thing to be cut. Yes, that is a reality that we're dealing with together today in many organizations, and we as individuals can't do much to change that. And we can fall into the trap, though, of thinking that means that we do not have access to professional development. But hopefully, by the time I finish my comments, you will see and feel that perhaps that does not need to be a limitation. Which relates to the next point here about how we define professional development. Traditionally, I certainly know that when I started out in my career, if you'd asked me what professional development meant, I would have probably answered, it refers to training and conferences. So that was kind of the traditional narrow lens through which I viewed it, I know, and perhaps people still have that view. But in reality, I think today the lines have gotten blurred between professional development and personal development, and we have access to an incredible array of both formal and informal activities and options that I would all characterize as professional development. Things like coaching and communities of practice and reflective reading, mentoring, getting involved in organizations, committees, boards as a volunteer, experimenting with innovative practices, combinations of both head learning activities and experiential activities, all of which I put under the broad umbrella of professional development. And of course, lastly, time is a hindrance, a barrier, but as with everything in life, if we regard it as something that's important enough, we generally tend to be able to make time for it. So, why is professional development defined broadly like this? Why is it worth the investment of our precious time? Well, here's a list of some reasons that I believe in. When I think back on what I've done in my career that falls into this category of professional and personal development, I think about the time when I struggled with having confidence in my writing. And so I went out on a limb and kind of offered to write articles in a regional newsletter, and then that went on to a national newsletter, and then that went on to a chapter in a book, and then it went on to being an author of an entire book. And so with each of those steps that I took, my confidence increased, and I had that affirmation from my colleagues and peers that, yes, I really did know what I was talking about, and I actually ended up to be and proving to myself that I was a pretty good writer. One type of professional development I think often we don't necessarily think of is the opportunity to practice or learn and apply some new knowledge or a new skill. And again, early on in my career, I agreed to be treasurer of an organization because I had not had the need to learn much about how to read financial statements and prepare budgets in my paid work. But I took on the role of being treasurer of an organization with the understanding, I was upfront about that, but with the knowledge that this would be a great way for me to actually learn and then apply that knowledge. And it paid off, for sure. Often we can choose to expose ourselves to a different type of person or setting than what we are normally comfortable with. I think that's happening a lot today in terms of working with people with disabilities. It may be something that I personally have not had contact with, but I can choose to take on a role or do something do some kind of learning experiential activity that's going to kind of help me move into being more comfortable with that, in that realm, being with those kind of folks, incorporating them into my programming, etc. Sometimes professional development can come in the form of a new challenge. If your current job is getting a little stale, that may be a sign that it's time to kind of branch out, tackle something new, look in a new direction, and we'll talk more about how to do that in a moment. Certainly, some kinds of professional development can lead to a promotion, a pay raise, or just a repositioning, a difference in how people perceive us, perhaps helping us to be perceived more as a leader or as a mover and shaker, as an effective change agent or innovator. So these are some of the potential personal benefits that I think can come from professional development, and why it's worth investing your time and resources in it. But how do we get started? Well, just to want to suggest a few steps that might be helpful. I think that I would encourage you to begin by devoting some time to some serious self-reflection, to focus your thinking and gain some clarity about where you are now and what kind of professional development you might want to pursue, so that it's more than just jumping at the first idea that presents itself to you, or the first opportunity that comes knocking on your door for learning, but rather that you can be more strategic about how you are going to spend that precious time and whatever money that you might be putting out of pocket for this kind of enrichment. So a good place to start are some of these questions. They're going to kind of force you to dig a little deeper than the obvious, and I would encourage you to let them percolate over time, make some notes, not jump to conclusions, perhaps have a conversation with others about some of these questions. What are you really curious about? Are you happy with others in your organization regard you, or would there be some change that you'd like to make? How do you feel about the work that you do now? Is it satisfying? Is it frustrating? Is it stressful? Probably. Probably all those things. But, you know, what is the predominant feeling that you have, and would you want to change that in the future? What's holding you back? That's an incredibly powerful question. Are you nervous or stressed about changing? And the next to last bullet there, if I don't do anything to improve my competence, what might happen? Sometimes flipping it around and asking, what if I don't do anything? Is there going to be a consequence for that I need to think about? Second step would be to not forget, please remember, the incredible power of your colleagues and peers. And there are, of course, lots and lots of ways to take advantage of this and act on this. There's that networking, which certainly is still regarded today as one of the most highly valued benefits of many associations and affinity groups. No doubt it is why you are a member of ACCP for sure. Mentoring, joining those affinity groups are the ones that come to mind. But I wanted to just highlight here a particular type of structured interaction that I learned about fairly recently, and that I think might be really relevant for you and helpful. And that is the idea of a peer career coach. It's important to clarify that this is different than a mentoring relationship. This is an opportunity to strategize with a peer in the field, someone who is kind of an equal of you. Usually we think of choosing a mentor to be someone who has more knowledge and experience than I do. But a peer career coach is someone else who's basically at the same point in their career as I am, and we both want an ally in discovering our career ladder and the steps we need to take to achieve our future aspirations. So it's very much of a partnership of equals. It involves regular communication So you don't have to be in the same community. You can do this long distance across the country. And you decide on a set of regular phone calls. You develop a plan for what you're going to talk about on each call. You give each other equal amounts of time. So selecting someone that you trust, that you respect, that is going to be responsive, and who's willing to make a time commitment to this are really the keys to success. So hope that you'll consider looking into that perhaps, if that seems like it might be useful to you. Third step is to go ahead and put something down on paper to map out what your plan is. Now, there are plenty of templates out there on the web for, quote, professional development plans. Some of them are extremely elaborate, but in my mind, this does not have to be complicated. You can design your own form very simply. There's just some critical information that you're going to want to capture here. And I would caution you about getting hung up on the fact of having to map out the entire next 10 years. That's not really what I'm suggesting. You need to choose the time frame that makes the most sense for you. So you might say, well, my long-term goal is that someday I'd like to move from the corporate sector into the nonprofit sector. So that's my long-term goal, but within the next 2 years, these are some steps I think I need to take that will set me on that path. Deadlines, of course, are really helpful to most people. You may want to include who else will be involved with you along the way. Are there people who can be a resource or offer a different perspective or influence and help you get what you need to do, or get a resource that you need. And then lastly, a way to record your progress so that you have a sense of accomplishment. It reminds you what you've done and why you did it, and your reflections on how it turned out. This can actually, over time, provide perhaps some unexpected additions to your resume, and also some helpful answers to questions that you might even be asked in a new job interview. Finally, just to wrap up here, I think that it's kind of ironic, because we started out by thinking about professional development as being okay, it's all about me. I get to focus on myself, and that's very, very true. But implicit in all kinds of professional development is the fact that it ends up affecting our organizations and many other people, even our communities. I like the analogy of a canary in the mine. You know, miners have for decades carried a canary down into the mine with them to be the signal for changes in the atmosphere that might mean that there was danger in the air and they would need to evacuate the mine. Well, I think our role in volunteer administration, volunteer engagement, corporate philanthropy, we are often the canaries in the mine. We are the one person in our organization that understands what's happening out there in the bigger sector, understands what subtle changes are occurring socially, regulation-wise, trend-wise in our society that affects engagement and volunteerism. And it's our role, part of our role is to alert our organizations to the need for changes and adaptations or strategic decisions about what's happening in our organizations. Our roles are automatically connected to the greater community. What we do and how we do it has a clear impact on many, many people and organizations outside our corporate walls. So I think we can wrap it up by saying that professional development is going to lead to improvements in our whole organization, the quality of our own work, and the quality of the impact that our work generates. So I would encourage you to not wait for professional development to be handed to you, but to seize the initiative and make it happen for yourself, and use it as a strategic tool to move your passion and your organization's mission where you want it to go. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda so she can pick up the ball and talk about pro bono expertise.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. And hi, everyone. As was mentioned before, my name is Amanda MacArthur. I'm the Vice President of Global Pro Bono at PYXERA Global. We work primarily in the international space or cross-border space, sending employees to work on pro bono projects in emerging markets, but we do a lot of work here in the United States as well. We run domestic programs for Walmart, for JP Morgan Chase, and for SAP. So I'll be happy to talk a little bit about those programs over the course of this presentation. I also just wanted to note real quickly that our chapter in the book was targeted mostly at nonprofits. So this is a little centered on organizations that are receiving pro bono expertise, but I think there's some good learnings kind of both ways here. So please feel free to pop up with questions as they come up. So just quickly, I think it's always good to kind of base everything and make sure we're talking about the same thing. So what is pro bono? I'm sure you all know the term, but essentially what we're talking about is providing your professional skills in a way that improves organizational capacity, duplicate there, for usually a social mission-driven organization. At PYXERA Global, we work a lot with NGOs, we work a lot with government institutions, we work with social enterprises, we work with educational institutions, kind of on the receiving side of pro bono. One of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind is that it is a transaction and that both parties are bringing value to the table. The volunteer, the pro bono consultant, as we generally call them, is bringing their expertise and their time and hopefully their passion to a project that will contribute to the operational excellence of their host client. The nonprofit or the host client also is bringing something to the table, and they're really, I think that balance has to be struck, and you have to recognize that the role of the host organization is as robust as the role of the volunteer, and that you really have to dedicate time and resources to this relationship, but you also have to have some expectations in place, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So just to kind of talk about some of the statistics, as far as career development, pro bono is a great way to do that. It's a great way to expand your professional expertise, to use your skills in a slightly different way, maybe to gain a bit of a different perspective. And increasingly companies are using pro bono as a way to develop their employees. This is from a report by True Impact from a couple years ago, but I think that the statistics are still valuable. 142% more likely to increase job-related skills as opposed to more traditional volunteering, and 47% more likely to report high satisfaction than traditional volunteers. And I think this really has to do with the ability to engage your knowledge in a different way, and for an organization that is going to see an immediate impact for it. So often in our jobs we're sitting in our cubicles or sitting in our office and we don't have that exposure to what's going on in the world around us. And this really, pro bono programs really enable you to kind of get out there and use your skills for good, and for an organization that might not have access to them otherwise. So just some of the things that you have to think about from both sides, actually, if you're going to be a pro bono volunteer or if you're going to host a pro bono consultant, or even if you're just thinking of developing a pro bono program, is really what do you want to achieve? What are your goals for the initiative? What are you willing to invest from a time perspective, from a resource perspective? Is it just going to be time, or are there other product donations or other things that might go along with it? And then what resources do you have that can support both those goals? And from the pro bono or from the host client perspective, it's similar. What can they achieve based on the resources that they have available internally? How can they support this project? It can't be all about the pro bono consultant coming in and giving. There really is a transaction that has to take place between the host client and the pro bono consultant. So just some things to think about as you are developing a pro bono project, but also as you're maybe looking for pro bono opportunities is, are the right decision makers in place? Are they going to be available during the period of time that the volunteer assignment will be taking place? If they aren't available and to make that final yes-no decision, all the work you do could be done in vain, and it could just sit on a shelf, which is kind of a worst-case scenario. 2 is make sure that you have the meeting scheduled in advance. I think especially in pro bono, in social mission-driven organizations, everybody is over-assigned. We're all doing multiple jobs, and so making the space and the time for that often requires a significant level of planning. It's also important to have kind of the initial project plan set out in advance so that you can really have a roadmap to get where you want to go. I think it's really important in any pro bono experience to make it a personal experience. It is transactional. You are providing services in response to a scope of work or to a project, but it's important to have that personal relationship as well and really get to know each other, spend some time kind of learning about each other's lives. It's important to understand kind of what the culture is like at the organization you'll be working at. And from the host client side, it's important to understand the corporate culture that the pro bono consultant is coming from, and what does that mean about their work style. There might be some adaptations that you both have to make in order to make this project as successful as possible. And then also I think it's really important to have some sort of orientation before you start, really as a way to get some of those forming questions out of the way early, to establish expectations, to kind of go over the mission and the culture of the organization, but also to make sure that everyone understands what the end result and the end goal of the project is. So the basic foundation of any project, whether it be a paid or a pro bono consultancy, is the scope of work. And it's really critical. This is really the most critical aspect, I think, of a project. And if it's not created well, it can be really challenging to have a success. And we, in our work at PYXERA Global, spend a lot of time with our host clients really trying to create a scope of work that is as clear and as delineated as possible for the pro bono consultants who will be working with them. But I can tell you that 9 times out of 10 there are changes to the scope of work once the volunteer starts working. So having it as laid out and as structured as possible in advance is really important, but it's also important to be really flexible. And just here we're listing kind of some of the aspects of the scope of work that are really going to set your pro bono consultants up for success. I think working through these steps also really helps the organization that will be receiving the pro bono support really determine kind of what their need is and how immediate that need is, which is really important. I think sometimes social mission organizations or NGOs, if they have an opportunity to receive pro bono work or volunteer work, they feel like they have to say yes, whether it might not be the right time or not for the organization, just because it's something that's coming without a cost. And if you aren't in a time or a place or a resource or have the resources in order to take it forward, it's not going to be a useful use of anyone's time. So we all know about SMART goals, and I think in developing a scope of work for a pro bono consultancy, it's really important to be smart, to be really specific, to really think about why is this important to the organization, what has prevented it from being achieved in the past, what information does the volunteer need to be successful. On the measurement side, it's really important to understand what success looks like. How will the project enable you to better serve your mission? What are the metrics to collect and report on? Instead of achievable, or sometimes you see accountable for the A, I think for these projects it's agreed upon. And really that means that there is this mutuality to these projects. You kind of both have to come to an agreement as to what the end goal will be. And as far as what are the expectations for work, how often do you expect to hear from the pro bono volunteer or have them work with you directly? What is the communication preferred style? All of those things are really important to lay out. Realistic. What resources are available for the project? You might have this great idea, you need a new financial reporting system for your organization, and you can have somebody come in and spec it out as a pro bono project and tell you what you need. But if you don't have the resources to implement that, having the best plan in place really will get you nowhere. And also it's really important to be very clear as to what the constraints are. Pro bono or nonprofit organizations are working in a resource-constrained environment that is more resource-constrained than even corporations in our kind of general cost-cutting environment are used to. And it might just not just be financial constraints. It could be human resource constraints. It could be technology constraints. And one of the things from the pro bono volunteer side that you have to be also is realistic about what's going to work for this organization. What is kind of the least best solution? And by that I don't mean not the best solution, but what solution meets their needs in such a way that doesn't overcomplicate anything. And then finally, why now? And when do you need the deliverable? So, clearly pro bono volunteers are often working their daytime jobs while they're also doing their pro bono work. And it's really important to understand how much time they're going to be able to spend and what that realistically means with regards to the project to be delivered. So kind of during the project, I think these are four kind of best practices that work, again, going both ways. So one is that both sides must commit to the project fully. The time has to be dedicated, the resources have to be dedicated, and it really does have to be a partnership in which the volunteer is getting access to the tools and the information that he or she needs to be successful, but then also that the host client is having access to this expertise in a reasonable time as well. Leave room for dialogue and transparency. Anytime you're coming in as a consultant, you're kind of coming in somewhat blind. You don't know the complete history of an organization. You don't know what extenuating circumstances might be in place, what are the constraints with regards to the board or to stakeholder interactions or constituency bases. All of these things are to some degree shrouded, and it's really important to have that discussion and to say, okay, these are non-touchable issues, or what are non-touchable issues for you, and then is there flexibility to maybe implement some different programming or some different processes. Keep an open mind. So I think, I've worked most of my career in a nonprofit, but in a nonprofit that works primarily with the private sector. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of how both sides operate. And there are some real differences. Just the difference between being driven by stakeholder value as opposed to shareholder value is a really dramatic, if a bit it's not entirely clear differentiation between the two groups. So, for a nonprofit, efficiency might not be their greatest need. They might not want to reduce labor costs as much as we are in the private sector. You are kind of constantly told to do. I've worked with organizations in, just for example, in India. They were packaging agricultural products, and it was very clear that they were completely overstaffed. They had 4 people packing one box essentially. But this organization was trying to create jobs, and they had that flexibility within their funding structure that they were able to almost kind of over-resource certain tasks. They were looking for pretty low-skilled opportunities, and that was a way to do it, essentially. So it's really important to kind of keep an open mind and try to understand why steps are being taken the way they are. It might not be the simplest answer, but the context around it will be critical. And then finally, flexibility. I think, like I said before, scopes of work, while they are the foundation for a project, and while they, the more developed they are and the stronger they are, the better the project will be, it is also important to understand that they're probably going to change, that you don't know what you don't know, and when you bring in an expert, they might be able to tell you something that will totally change your thinking. And they might do it within the first 20 minutes of meeting with you. Or it might take a couple weeks, and once they really dig into the project, for them to kind of finalize what the actual need is. So it's really important that you keep an open mind and try to be as flexible as possible. So, just a few things, kind of the difference between corporate culture and nonprofit culture. One is that, like I said before, nonprofits are often incredibly resource constrained. And so it is important to make sure that you have a clear discussion about that kind of early and often, and really say, what can't be touched, and where are there areas for efficiency. Pace of work. Nonprofits, those people who work for them are often doing a number of different jobs and are very busy. The pace can be more slow than in the private sector. And so, because people are doing so many different things, getting decision makers buy-in can take a little bit more time. You might have to wait for different funding cycles. There are a lot of differentialities that you just need to take into account. And then finally, like I said before, it's really important to understand the mission of the host organization and to really buy into it. And I think one of those things is to make sure that you get out and meet the constituents. Even if your project might be working in the back office doing something related to financial management, it's important to understand how the organization operates. And ultimately that can help you, I think, take things back to your day job as well, in that it gives you a slightly different perspective on how your professional expertise can be used differently. So just over this slide, let me just talk a little bit about a couple pro bono programs that I'm familiar with, which have a domestic or kind of a non-travel component. I'll talk about 2 of them. One is JP Morgan Chase's Detroit Service Corps. It's a relatively high-touch program, and by that I mean it's an embedded program. So a team of 12 JP Morgan Chase corporate employees travel to Detroit for 3-week assignments, skills-based pro bono assignments, to work with organizations in Detroit that are either recipients of JP Morgan Chase's grants around their Detroit investment, or which are potential grantees, so kind of in advance of any grant money. They work on a number of different projects, lots related to workforce development. The teams are global in nature, so there are Americans and Indians and Anywhere that there is a JP Morgan Chase employee base, there's a possibility for folks to come and volunteer on the project. It's a competitive process to get through the program and to be assigned to a team. For that program, PYXERA Global handles kind of all of the logistics. We handle all the flights and actually do the participant selection as well. But I think the most important part of what we do there is selecting the client organizations and really working with them to develop a project that is going to benefit from the skills and expertise of the JP Morgan Chase employees. That is what we would consider kind of an embedded or a high-touch program. The other program I'll talk about is SAP's Engaging for a Local Impact program, which is a global program. They do it in a number of locations where SAP has employees. And it's about a 4 to 6 week engagement. It's also a competitive application process. After the teams of SAP employees are selected and the potential host clients are selected, we run what's called a scope-a-thon, which is about a half day of the SAP employees working with their host client to develop the scope of work and what they're going to work on over a period of time. This is all in their home community, so it's commutable from their home of residence. After the scope-a-thon, they spend just maybe 2 days, 3 days working embedded within the local organization. And that really just kind of gets the project off to a good start. So they can collect the data they need, they can get a feel for how the office operates, perhaps they can go visit constituents or stakeholders. Over the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks, the work is done primarily virtual. So the SAP employees go back to their day jobs and spend most of their days doing their everyday tasks. A certain time is set aside every day for them to work in their volunteer teams on the deliverable that they will be handing over to the NGO that they're working with. And they usually have 1 or maybe 2 calls a week with their host client just to kind of make sure that they're moving forward in the same way. At the end of the project, just 1 or 2 days sometimes is spent back at the host organization kind of doing all the final wrap-up for the project and handing it over to their client. So that's another model. It's less intensive. There's no travel. It's really enabling people who can't go away to do this type of work. The one other project we do that does not have travel would be a program we run with Dow Chemical, which is called Leadership in Action, which is primarily virtual in nature. And it's really about developing virtual teaming skills amongst the Dow employees while working with host clients in key emerging geographies for Dow Chemical. This year they'll be working in Indonesia. They are currently in the process of conducting their virtual consulting, and then they'll travel to Indonesia in September for just 1 week to work with their host client. So it's a little bit of a hybrid where most of the time is spent working at home on the projects, and then they do get a little glimpse of the cultural impact of those programs. So that's kind of what I have for my session today. I'm happy to answer any questions folks have. I know there's one about pro bono programs with union employees. I don't know the answer to that. We did have a program that is not active anymore with Dow Corning where they did use hourly employees, but they had all those negotiations kind of on their side, so we weren't involved in that aspect of it. I know that there's some questions around some labor issues when it comes to this type of thing, but I'm sure that they can be worked out.
Great, and it looks like another question came in saying, from Joan, how can we gain buy-in for this type of professional development from HR? How can we make them see this as beneficial as opposed to time off of work?
So from the pro bono side of things, we have some great statistics on skills development, talent development, leadership competencies that all come from doing these pro bono engagements. Now, most of ours have to do with global programs, and so developing global leadership competencies. There is also some good evidence around retention and recruitment that is increased as a result of pro bono programs, especially amongst millennials. They really want to work for companies that provide them with opportunities to use their skills in the community and for good. So I think that those are some good statistics that can help. I think anytime you can put numbers behind something, it's really beneficial. And we're increasingly seeing programs that we run with joint human resources and employee engagement or corporate social responsibility at the corporate side.
Great. And Katie, do you have anything to add from the volunteer administration point of view in terms of how people can get professional development as a buy-in from HR?
Yeah, I did just want to comment a little bit from the personal perspective, because I understand there's two ways to ask this. But I think if one is trying to lobby for some professional development support as an individual, from your HR department, then two of the things I mentioned, I think, well, one of them is to present your request as part of that larger plan that I talked about creating, so that there's a context for why am I asking to go to this conference? Why am I asking to purchase this book? It's not a whim. It's not a impulsive request. It is part of a larger plan that I have mapped out for myself that will have benefits for me, that will also carry over into providing benefits for the organization. So I think that could be often that's not done when we make a request for our own professional development, for resources to support something, a course or a class we want to take. And I've seen that, just from the nonprofit perspective, play out quite successfully. A simple example is that my agency supports me going to that conference, but I agree that when I get back, I'm going to actually give a presentation at the next staff meeting to share the highlights of what I learned with my colleagues. So there's a ripple effect spillover. One other idea that occurs to me, which again I have done myself over the years. When I worked for the state of Virginia, there was a time when funding for professional development was very, very limited, and but I succeeded in convincing them to support my going to a conference because I met them halfway. I said, this is really important to me. It's so important to me and my own development and my commitment to my work that I'm willing to pay for my registration fee if you, my employer, will cover my travel. And they bought it. They went for it. So I think, again, this is not just about having resources handed to us willy-nilly. It's about justifying it and in terms of its greater impact, and being willing to invest something ourselves as well. So those would be my two thoughts on that.
Great. That's really good advice. And it's really nice to hear your personal experience as well, because, not only is your career focused on that, but you're doing it yourself, so it kind of, amplifies how people can get professional development and how to make it part of their life. So thank you for sharing. Okay, any other questions? Definitely feel free to type it in the chat box or tweet it with hashtag VMBPN. Okay. So thank you to everyone who tweeted today. I did want to reiterate that we do have a new book out, Volunteer Engagement 2.0, and Katie and Amanda are two authors in this book. You just got a great sneak peek of their chapters, so thank you for sharing. And I do want to announce the winner. So drum roll, congratulations to Joan. Thank you so much for tweeting today. You are a winner of the new book. So I will reach out to you on Twitter. We'll get your information so we can mail that book to you today. Congrats. And in fact, everyone is kind of a winner today. Webcast attendees get 25% off the book. So if you would like to learn more about the book or purchase the book, definitely visit that special bit.ly link that we have right there on the slide, and you can get your copy today. And on behalf of Volunteer Match, it was a pleasure to be part of this webcast. If you're interested in learning more about what Volunteer Match does, definitely visit our blog, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you again, everyone. This was great.
All right. On behalf of ACCP, I'd like to thank Stephanie and Amanda and Katherine for their advice and words of wisdom. And I'm going to unmute everyone right now.
The conference has been unmuted.
I'm going to stop the recording.